with adults, like, do you always tell the police when something like that is happening?
Yeah, you
Okay.
would talk to the police. Like if it was an adult person who was elderly or a person who was mentally incapable, it would be the police.
Okay. And would you need their consent if they're like intellectually incapable to do that?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
If they're elderly, do you need the permission to do that?
No,
Okay.
because they wouldn't necessarily divulge, right?
Okay.
And we're going to talk about why.
Okay. But like for like domestic violence and things like that, you don't.
Mm-mm. Because, I mean, the only time that would get a little dicey is if you thought the person was not of sound mind, but then that brings in a whole lot of other stuff, okay? So as a nurse, I probably would want to be talking to, I would go up my chain of command, okay, for one thing. I would definitely go up my chain of command. I'd be talking to the physician who was caring for them at the time as well, okay? So if you thought someone, was psychotic, if you thought someone was mentally disabled due to chronic abuse, something like that, some people get brain damage, that kind of thing, and you're not sure that they're actually making independent decisions, in that case, I would want to go further to figure it out. But no, otherwise no, and the reason is because essentially what you're doing is they're pressing charges is what that kind of comes down to. And so they have the decision, right, to make, do I want to press charges against that individual or don't I?
Okay, and like if so, this might be a stupid question, I don't know. But so like let's say somebody who's like 20 or somebody comes in and says, hey, I was raped, I want to do this or whatever, or if they just wanted like the Plan B thing or whatever, do you tell the police that they came in?
Anytime
that?
there's an assault, you have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And like she said, you can choose they can choose to talk to them or not.
Yeah.
Any
And if
of
they
that?
don't like want that,
Uh-huh.
you just don't tell them like their name and stuff.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because what if you are in that situation in which we're a college campus and you have a sexual assault reported and 2 days later you have another one and 2 days later you have another. Do you see what I mean? They need to be aware that an assault occurred. The details are not important, maybe right at that moment, right? But they need to be aware that an assault occurred, and that's why.
Okay.
Good question?
I'm sorry, I am still struggling with like a very simple concept. Is there a definition or like a rigid like box that you can put child abuse into, like physical abuse? Or is it just subjective based on what the nurse considers abusive? Because some nurses might see practices and be like, oh, that's fine, my mom used to beat the crap out of me, that's normal. And then some nurses would be like, oh, that's too far. Like what is the definition that would make it abuse?
No, I don't think that there necessarily is one. I mean, because of that, because what if you were raised in a household where beating with a belt was a normal everyday thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And somebody else wasn't. I don't consider beating with a belt as a normal everyday thing okay. You know what I mean? So this is why. You go by your subjective and objective data. If you feel that a child is in any kind of danger, and don't forget, and we're getting to this, right, but the number one kind of neglect or abuse is neglect. So it could be that their clothes haven't been washed, they haven't been fed, whatever. Somebody in some way is not taking care of them, okay? So I think that the most important take home is it is not wrong to make that report, okay? Again, was it completely inconvenient to have strangers wandering in and out of my house, threatening my nursing license? Yeah. Did it kind of piss me off? Yeah. But whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever. I understood what was going on. And at the end of the day, if that's what needed to happen, okay, my kid was not right. And if somebody was hurting her, then that would have had to happen. That's the way that I see it. People get mad, so what? If somebody's hurting someone and you ignore that and something worse happens, I don't think I could live with that. So that's to me the other alternative too. Do you know what I mean?
So it's just if you have any question about whether or not it is,
If
just
you really think that
report
might
it
be happening and
regardless.
you're not sure, it's okay to just call it in,
Okay.
right? Because they're the ones that know all the ins and outs. They're going to go and they're going to really look and investigate. They're going to ask the hard questions. They're going to ask the questions that we wouldn't think of, and they're going to know how to ask, right, to get the answers.
So does it come down to then the subjectivity of the person doing the investigation of whether or not it's found to be abuse?
Mhm.
Is whether
Yep.
or not they think, like what they grew up with?
Yep. It is.
Like there isn't
Well,
any
not what they
legal
grew up with.
guidelines. Well, yeah, but then it
They're
impacts
licensed
their
social
view.
workers, I mean, they've had a lot of training
Yeah.
in that, yeah, to
But
go
I'm
into
sure
the
it
home and,
varies.
yeah, I mean, but there's criteria they have to go
Okay.
by as well, yeah. Which, I mean, you know, and they're short-staffed and all that stuff, so sometimes it comes down to being a question of, well, it's going on, but this kid is not really in any imminent danger, and so I have no foster home to put them in, or whatever, and so they stay. It happens, we all know it happens, right? Because you hear about these kids being killed, and then you find out DCFS has been there 4 times before, I mean, that's a whole other thing, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's hard, it is. I hate this, I told you back when we did the suicide one, I hate that lecture, hate this one equally, okay? These are my least 2 favorites. Okay, so you know when you're reading, if you did your readings, I pointed out certain pages in these chapters because we're not testing on everything, so that's important. These are all the different types of violence and abuse that go on. She pointed out financial abuse this morning, that's super common among the elderly. That's one of the main kinds, you know. Neglect for kids is the most common, make sure you remember that. You'll see that show up somewhere. We'll talk just a tiny bit about workplace violence, because unfortunately for nurses, that does affect us. We went through all these factors this morning, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, except to say that the most number 1 reason and contributing factor to abuse is having been abused. If you have an abuse history, you are more likely to abuse, which is how it perpetuates, okay? It doesn't have to, right? We know this from when we did substance abuse. Just because you know, had a parent that was an alcoholic doesn't mean you're gonna be, it just means your risk is higher, right? So, some things about abusers, typical traits for any abuser: low self-esteem, problem-solving skills are crummy, very impulsive, very hypersensitive. They see themselves as a victim, oddly. Very narcissistic. They don't really look at other people as important. They're only important to themselves, okay? So interestingly, they've done some studies, because we used to think that it was an impulse control issue when people abuse. They lose their mind, you know, and just get angrier and angrier. But what they found is that is not true. And how they figured this out is because these abusers will not abuse their bosses at work. They will not abuse the police officers that come knocking on the door, right? They can hold all their crap together, and then they choose when and who to abuse. They do it in the privacy of the home. They know to hit where there's clothing covering, so you can't see the marks, right? It's important when we see someone that's potentially a victim of abuse that we look in their hairline, because hair covers up bruises and bumps pretty easily, right? So they know where to go, okay? So in order to do that, you have to be thinking, right? You're not over here like if you ever got really angry and, you know, got in a fight with somebody. I mean, I personally have never been in a fist fight. I hope I never am. I'm not very strong. But you know, if you get mad and you throw something or you do something out of anger, usually not aiming, right? It just kind of lands where it lands. So you have to be calculating and thinking. So abusers typically are doing that. We're going to talk about assessment stuff. So if you're assessing a child, you have to tell them, it's just like when she talked this morning about sexual assault victims, they do not do anything wrong. Because children, you know, they want to be with their parents regardless of how poorly they're treated. And we don't want to pressure them to talk about anything. Because at the end of the day, that's their parent that loves them. It is what ends up happening, part of how abuse is perpetuated, right, is this is what I see love to be. Being controlled, being hit, whatever, this is what love looks like to me. It's the only way I've seen it, it's the only way I know it, and so this is how it comes forward then, right? So we want to be supportive, non-threatening, all this kind of stuff. Oftentimes kids use play to express what's going on. I'll show you a picture drawn by a little kid and how it kind of comes across what was going on. I have a good friend who was in an abusive relationship, and when they did play therapy with her daughter, she put all the little peoples and all the little stuff, they had like a dollhouse, a nice big dollhouse, and everything went into one room. And she said it was because in their house, how she felt safe was they basically spent all their time in one room. So when the abuser was around, they locked themselves up in this one room. And so that's where everybody stayed, away from that person. So you can get a lot of information out of just letting them do their thing. We don't want to be suggestive. if the person's old enough to understand confidentiality, right? And then we want to make sure that we keep our poker face. When I was a student nurse and I was working down in Peoria in the pediatric unit, we had a 3-year-old little girl whose stepbrother broke both her hips, raping her. And so she had this horrible cast. I don't think we use these anymore, but at the time she was casted to her waist. And the cast went down to her feet, and she had like a bar, they called it a hip spica cast, between, because everything had to be kept perfectly straight. And she was just terrified of everything. I mean, obviously, and you'd go in to take her vitals, and she'd just cry. You take the stuff, you take the thermometer out, and she'd cry. So like, you had to work on just walking in the room that you were being pleasant and smiley and immediately sitting as, without even approaching her, sitting down, getting on her level kind of thing, We had another one that was brought in for a bellyache. There was a perfect boot print on her abdomen from her dad, So keeping your neutral face, because of course you can scare a kid really easy with your scared face, right? So those are some things we have to keep in mind. So this picture was drawn by an abused 6-year-old. And some of the things that it tells us, just from looking at it, so the distance away that she is from everybody else signifies isolation and rejection and fear. So she has physically separated herself from them. She's smaller than the other sibling. So that signifies insecurity and low self-esteem, and also a desire to withdraw and not be noticed. So sometimes you find that with child abuse, there's a one person picked out to be abused. Even in a family that has more than one kid, sometimes it's one kid, and the other children and the spouse will be pulled in to abuse that child as well, for whatever reason, made to. She shaded out the center of her body, which shows anxiety about that particular part of her body. So she's covering that up. She's missing her mouth and her hands, and so that signifies powerlessness to act or to speak. Okay. The heavy lines around the father's body is meant to show aggression and anger. Obviously his big teeth. And his mouth like he's yelling and showing his teeth. So just from her drawing that little picture. I also find it interesting that mom is sad and brother is happy. Mm-hmm. So it makes you wonder about the dynamic there. Okay. So doing this kind of stuff can be helpful. We also use things like bibliotherapy with kids. You can go ahead.
So is there somebody who can decode kids
drawings
and
therapists.
stuff like that?
Yep. Yeah, there are therapists that work with kids, and they do this sort of stuff. They play games. They do specifically the play therapy, and then they alter it depending on the age of the child. Very small, just play. And when they play, you can ask them questions and you can decode what they're doing just by them playing. When they start to get a little bit older, like school age, they can play, and then you can talk to them about what they're playing at, and they can actually give you more information. The play is sometimes even a little bit of a distraction, or there's certain games they can play that will help you pick out what's going on. And the art therapy, it's the same way. Same think about the adults that do their art therapy. You know what I mean? A lot of stuff comes out when you look at the color choices people make. And that kind of stuff, content that they draw. Sometimes you can pull stuff out of that. So there are therapists just for kids that do this. You have to dig a little bit, but they're out there. So physical indicators for kids that have experienced sexual abuse. I'm just going to run through these because she really didn't. Some of them were obvious than others, so difficulty walking and sitting, itching of privates, UTIs, or painful urination. So usually, it's not uncommon for a kid to get a UTI. Kids are not the best wipers in the world. So usually the first one gets treated and nobody really makes too much of that, If they get them frequently, if they get more than 2, they might start investigating a little bit more. And sometimes it's that they hold their pee. I mean, my middle kid dribbled pee all the time, and it was just it was ridiculous. And we went and we actually had her looked at down in Peoria, and they did a bladder scan. This was not a thing we had just handy then, Now you can just drag one out of the room. But we took her down there, and they had her empty her bladder, and then they scanned her, and not even kidding, her bladder was completely full after going pee. Because basically what was going on was she was too busy playing to stop and go pee. And so she held her bladder was giant and so full, and she's like, I don't have to go pee. So we had this thing, we had to make her go pee every 2 hours, and she hated it, and she was mad at us for it. No, we're like, it's time to go pee. Go and go. I don't have to go pee. It was like a fight, you know. You're peeing your pants because you don't go pee. So, anyways, obviously torn, stained, bloody underpants, stuff like that, bruises around the genitalia. STIs in preteens, we shouldn't be seeing that. I mean, you know, kids are active younger, so we do have to be looking for that. Any kind of swelling or discharge, any kind of objects, okay, you know, kids do explore, but there should not be objects. In the vagina, in the rectum, there should not be any of that. Okay, so when you talk to parents, so this is tricky. Somebody was asking a question about this before we got started. It's really important and it's hard. Keep your questions open-ended, keep them not accusatory. If you make enemies out of them, you're done, right? You're not getting anything. So it's important to keep in mind that you want to try to get information, okay? And so how you do that, you can ask questions like, what kind of arrangements when you leave your kid alone? One of the reasons we ask this is if we're suspecting neglect. You know, I think, somebody out here might know, I think the law is like, what, 13 before kids can be
It is
left?
13.
Is 13 and kids can be left alone? What is that?
There is no legal age, it's dependent on the
Okay.
parent and if they feel that their child is capable of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know, good to know. So yeah, but so if you've got an 11-year-old that's being left to take care of the 5 and 6-year-old, you know, and you're suspecting neglect, I mean, you have to be really careful here, right? How many people are a single parent? How many people lack resources to get, you know, or can't pay for child care or whatever, and so they're in these situations. So we need to just ask the questions, right? We might ask, how do they punish their child? Okay, so we talked about that before, right? If you know, you come from the belt slingers and that's what you're doing, okay? So we want to just ask the question, okay? If your baby's crying for a long time, honey, get them to stop. You know, all of you with children know, babies don't come with instructions. And that first one can be a real zinger, right? Because you just don't know what you're doing, you know? None of us know what we're doing. We wished we did. And so, like, I look at these situations and I think, you know, you read about them in the paper and it breaks your heart, you know, this one or that one, you couldn't get their baby to stop crying and, you know, suffocated or whatever. But I think, listen here, you take that, and I'm not picking on anybody, but you take that really young parent with very little education and no support, right? Who's up all night working a job and then comes home and tries to take care of that kid and has no resources, right? They don't have mom to come over and help with the baby, or they don't have, you know, maybe a good time to go in and get educated or whatever. And like, they reach their wits' end quickly is what I'm getting at, right? And you could see it maybe, right? How somebody could just get really frustrated and just not know what to do, okay? So we have to be a little empathetic to that, okay? No, we don't want it to happen, but we have to understand where some of that stuff may happen, right? How about this one? What does the child do to make you cry? Anybody's kid ever make them cry? Oh, my head. I was telling them earlier. My oldest one. I put myself in a timeout over her. She drove me nuts. She drove me square up the walls. Locked myself in the bathroom. And she's going, what are you doing, Mommy? I'm going, Mommy needs a timeout. Seriously. You know, I'm not afraid to admit that because the fact is some kids are hard work. Some kids do nice, sweet little things, sit around and play with their toys. And then other ones are just a challenge. They make us work for it, okay? But what if you didn't think about that? What if you were impulsive and didn't have resources and didn't know what to do, you know? What about getting time for yourself? Oh, you're busy, you're working parents, you're in school parents, you get no time to yourself. And then you got this kid that's, you know, all in your face all the time, right? And then what about partner support? Some people don't have any, and then some people have this partner who's even more than not supportive, but maybe abusive or whatever. So these are questions that you want to think about how you would ask. As she said this morning, intimate partner violence, it's all about control and power, always, okay? Patterns of assault can be anything. It usually starts out with social isolation, intimidating, threatening, and of course, any background. I think people are surprised when they realize that very wealthy people abuse, people in powerful positions abuse, you know. We like to paint a picture in our mind sometimes, but they're rarely accurate. And then the people who are abused, They're usually the subject of a lot of jealousy, even if there doesn't need to be any, because remember, that's in the abuser's mind, right? Isolated, all of that stuff that we talked about this morning. They believe that what their abuser says is true, right? Whether it is or not. Think about if you were living in one town and you had all your friends and family around you, and you met this person and they moved you far away from that place to where you didn't have any of those people anymore, and you were young, you didn't drive a car, you didn't have any education, so now you're over here. You might be a little bit isolated from the people that you know, right? Okay? And you get married, and you have a couple of kids, don't have a job, no job, because the kids are your job, the house is your job, okay? This person is starting to control you, so it's not hard to see, right, how these things happen. And they happen gradually, usually before the person it's happening to even really realizes what's going on, right? So once that abuse gets going, that person has presented this as love to you, that I want you all to myself. You can't go to work, because if you go to work, you know, I won't see you that much. This is how it starts, right? It starts out as, I genuinely need you all to myself. I need to be able to spend this time with you, okay? But then it morphs into weirdness, right? People can't see it because it's happening slowly, okay? So now you're over here, and your job is the house and the kids, and you can't go to work, and you can't socialize because I need you all to myself. And that sort of feels like love, but it's really isolating, and it's really jealousy of nothing, right? And then other weird stuff starts happening. If you ever tried to leave me, I would kill you, and I would bury you where no one could find you. Okay? Do you see how this happens? It happens to people. It does. So from the outside in, saying to somebody that you should leave, well, that's ludicrous, right? That is ludicrous, because I'm in it. Now I'm in it, right? I got these kids to think about. I got no money, got no job. It's a lot, right? Okay, so they get them believing all this stuff, okay? People fear for their lives. They don't have money because they aren't given any money. They're at high risk for suicide, okay? One of the things you need to look for if you do have someone who's been abused, especially if you've been abused more than once, look at their hands for defensive wounds, okay? Because here's the thing. If somebody is being abused, you know, normally if somebody tries to hit you, you should do that, right? You put your hands up to protect yourself. If they stop doing that, that's a warning sign, okay? It is a warning sign, I have given up. If somebody's beating my face, I'm probably gonna, right? Does that make sense? If I'm no longer doing that, that's a problem, okay? Not that any and all of it isn't a problem, but now I should be thinking about the safety of this person in other ways. Okay, let's see. Thinking about suicide, thinking about homicide. If they have a job, they might lose it from harassment, okay? Anybody ever work with anybody who's got that person that's always calling, showing up? Sometimes that's an indicator, not always, but sometimes that person needs a little bit too much. Okay, I think we covered all this stuff already. We did.
Why did you get fired from work? Like, doesn't workplaces have something in place, like, I don't understand why you get fired.
Fired? Well, if the person makes it impossible for you to do your job.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm working labor and delivery. If I'm in a patient's room pushing with them and my partner is calling, you know, now, me personally, I'm not in an abusive relationship. If my husband calls on the phone and I'm busy, the person that answers the phone says she's busy, and that's where that goes. But an abusive partner would not accept that. Because you have to make sure you're actually where you say you are,
Okay.
which means you're coming out and answering the phone. Now imagine that happening over and over and over, right? And pretty soon, I work with you and I'm irritated because I have to keep going taking care of your stuff while I'm taking care of my stuff because you're on the phone, right? And you're also saying things to me like, if so-and-so calls, come and get me right away. Don't take a message, come and get me, right? Because I'm getting hell at home on the other end for not coming to that phone when you call. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so the abuser, you know, he looks or she like a normal person on the outside. Most people can't see this. They can have a substance abuse problem. Let's see. There's not really good treatment for these people, mostly because they don't think they have a problem. That's usually why. You do need to know that cycle of abuse that she talked about. There's the tension building, so there's a lot of edginess, a lot of walking on eggshells, trying to do everything right to make sure I don't tick that person off. And then the battering happens, right? Victims try to cover things up. They come in with vague complaints, headaches, stomach aches, little ache here, little ache there, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. So you see people that have sort of vague complaints show up a lot. Old injuries healing, that's another one. And then you get the honeymoon, right? This is where the person comes back and they do that, what's that called? What's that one term we learned? Communication term? I did something bad.
Undoing?
Yeah, undoing. Good job, right? I'm gonna bring you flowers because I feel bad for what I did and I'm gonna undo it now, which doesn't work, but. And then, the victim, so at this point, right, I want to believe you're a good person. I want to believe you didn't really mean it. You just lost your mind for a minute. I don't want our marriage to end. I don't want to lose my house, my kids. I just want this to be good. So I believe you. And then it all goes again, right? Let's see. So in order to assess someone for violence, there's questions that should be asked routinely to every doctor visit. So if you go in to have an annual checkup, we should really be asking these questions. If you're down in the ER, you should be asking these questions. Has anybody been hitting you, kicking you, punching you, or hurting you? If so, who? Do you feel safe? That's a super, super important question. An easy one and an important one, right? Remember that a person could have been asked these questions 10, 20 other times. Today might be the day for you. They might say, Harley, I trust you. You look like a trustworthy nurse. You seem to really care about me. So today, I'm going to say yes to your question. Okay? Might have said no 10 other times. Today I'm saying yes. And then also don't forget to ask about previous relationships because, people stalk and do weird stuff like that. So it's important to ask about previous relationships also. Somebody comes in with vague injuries that don't match their story. Okay? Also, you want to ask if the kids are being hurt too. Okay? Because again, don't forget, you are a mandated reporter, so even if this particular person doesn't really want to do anything, if they indicate their children are being hurt, you are a mandated reporter for that. Okay? Assess them for suicide, substance abuse, stuff like that. Document, document, document. Document to your best ability. And we talk about doing narrative notes and long notes. Here's where that really counts. You're not getting click boxes for this. You're not. If you're describing a bruise, a laceration, you need to describe where it is. Make it anatomically correct. My left arm is pretty big. Can't just say left arm. What does that mean, right? You're going to describe it, okay? And then if she will allow pictures, because pictures are very helpful for documentation. Does anybody in here like forensic files? I love me some forensic files. So, right, they go in there and they go back to these things, right? If somebody says, well, wow, this person that I decided to murder was also hitting me. And so they go back and they look at they go back and they try to find ER reports. They try to go back and look. If there's pictures, it's very helpful, right? So it doesn't matter if they chose to leave or not, but if there's pictures, that's helpful. So we want to document as best we can. Okay, we talked about go ahead.
Do those pictures just go on their chart from the ER visit?
They do. They do. Yeah, all that stuff they should be able to scan, and everything's electric now, so they should have the digital photos and stuff. Yeah. So we talked about this weird, vague symptoms, not real specific. PTSD often. Their ER visits will show things like falls, accidents, things that don't add up. We had a nurse that was actually being abused, and she repeatedly had the same black eye, and repeatedly gave the same story that she hit her face off her car door. And I think she forgot that she told that story. It's really sad.
I've actually done that before.
Well, yeah, I think people can, but I think how many times can you do it?
Yeah.
It was not like a bump. It was a full-on black eye. You know what I mean? It'd be hard to create. Okay, so then she talked about forensics this morning. So if this is important to know, put a star by this, okay? So if your patient is not ready to do anything, she says, I can't leave, I'm not ready to leave, you need to give her information, okay? All the bathrooms have that little peel off, this little tiny thing, it's a hotline number, maybe shelter information. Why is it little like that?
So they can't find it? The
Yeah, so you
abusers.
can hide it, because you know that abuser's going through a bag, right?
Yeah.
And stick it in her shoe, stick it inside her sock, in her bra, right? They're going through everything. Nothing that is yours is yours. Her money is not yours. You don't really own anything, okay? So you're gonna give her that information so that when she's ready, she has it, right? Pregnancy, intimate partner violence is a leading cause of injury-related deaths during pregnancy. Birth defects and pregnancy loss. Violence increases during pregnancy. Why?
Stress.
Like more jealousy?
More jealousy. That's right. Don't you be paying attention to this. You need to be paying attention to me, right? This is the abuser's mindset. So anything to do with this, not gonna make me happy. So the abuse will go up. And then a safety plan. So another thing you need to know about our safety plans, and you need to know what needs to go into a safety plan. Safety plan is for a quick exit. Okay, so we don't need 9 months worth of stuff, right? We need what we need right now. We need the important things, and we need just enough to get out and be able to move out quickly. So ideally, we want the person to be in a room with more than one exit, because if they're blocking one, how do we get out, right? So a room with more than one exit, and avoiding rooms with weapons, like kitchens, which have knives. They need to know the fastest way out of their house. If it's the workplace, they need to find out about resources to protect them at work as well. They need to talk to their neighbors if they can, if they feel like, that's an option, so their neighbors know if there are big noises to call the police. They could help them that way. They need a code word for their kids, their family, and their friends. So if I call you up and I say one word or I text one word, that means I need help right now. Okay, I need help. I need to get out. Whatever. And then the safe place that you've indicated. Okay, so if we're leaving, this is where we're going to meet up or whatever. The bag needs to be packed ahead. Just essential clothes and valuables, right? A prepaid phone card is a good idea because you probably ain't getting away with your phone. 1 month supply of medications, okay? Just enough. And the bag needs to be hidden, ideally not, God bless you, in their home. Ideally outside of the home somewhere. Because 1, the abuser could find it. 2, they may not be able to actually get to it to get it out of the house, right? Legal documents, super important. Birth certificate, social security numbers, photo ID, if there's a passport, welfare, green card, whatever they can actually get. Again, abusers, they have the power, they may have these things locked up, so if they can get it, they should get it, okay? Medical records, school cards, bank books, anything that they can get, they need to have a copy of, ready to go. Remember, just the essentials, they don't need 3 months worth, they just need what they need right now. Okay, we're gonna switch gears. So our old people are at risk for being abused. Neglect and financial, pretty common, some physical as well. Most commonly, it is perpetrated by daughters of women older than 80. So we get into our older ladies and their daughters, and if we think about it, it kind of makes sense. Daughters are oftentimes the caregiver, right, of the family. And it is not generally something, it generally is something that sort of happens by surprise. Caregiver role strain, when we talk about that, a person who is trying to take care of mom and is, running around from job to job, trying to keep mom out of a nursing home, whatever the case, and it just sort of evolves from there. May have also just plain started from, the neglect part that, want to keep mom home in the day, but I'm not here, I can only pop in once or maybe not at all. 1 in 10 are reported, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So cognitive impairment being the main one, right? Because our elderly people get older, they can't really get the point across. So communicating, low self-esteem, think about the fact that this is my daughter who I raised, who I'm so proud of and I love so much, and do I really want someone to come and arrest her for stealing my money or leaving me in a pee-pee diaper all day, or whatever, right? Allowing me to get bed sores and whatever the case. There's a lot of guilt there, so they don't want to do it. So they don't talk about it. There also is a fear of retaliation. It's going to happen next, right? So it's important that you interview these people in private. And it's important to use really good documentation of what you find, okay? Use quotes. Directly quote whatever it is they're telling you. Of course, our seniors are vulnerable to a lot of crime. If they're sexually abused or assaulted, people don't usually believe them, which is really unfortunate. And then people with depression, substance abuse, psychiatric illness, etc., can make it worse, right? Because when you have all these other things going on, one, they're easier to abuse and it's easier to ignore, right? Unfortunately. People over 80, 2 to 3 times more likely to be neglected and abused. They're more likely to die. And unfortunately, most of the victims are white. Okay, let's see. So again, it's usually due to extreme stress. It's not usually due because of the fact that there were abusers even before or intend to be abusive. It's usually, it just kind of works out that way. And a lot of times it's that the caregiver themselves are financially dependent on the elder. So maybe that person's job isn't working out well. They move back home to be with mom. And it's mom's checks coming in that are supporting that person, okay? So, in this case, more women abused than men. Symptoms are similar: bed sores, malnutrition from not being fed. They might be passive. They might actually talk to you about missing finances or missing valuables. And this is important because, you know, sometimes as people get older and they get forgetful, we might pass it off as, you know, or especially if there's family and like, oh, you know, she says that all the time, nothing's missing. Well, if you're the person taking it, you're going to say nothing's missing. So it's important to take those concerns seriously if you have that elder person who's talking about their money going missing, or maybe their jewelry or something like that, okay? It requires a little investigating. Okay, she talked about most all this morning. I don't know that I'm going to touch on too much here. Let's see. Oh, a couple things you need to know. You need to know the difference between a survivor and a victim. So when we start out, we are victims, right? And then as we get to the point where you're working through the issues and you're able to move on with life, that does not mean that you've forgotten or that it didn't happen. It just means that you're able to move forward in planning and doing in your life. Then you become a survivor, which is the goal, right? For anyone experiencing any kind of abuse or assault, okay? And it can take a lot of time, and truthfully, you know, again, I'm stressing this all the time. You never know when that person is going to divulge something to you. And it's really important that you listen, and it's really important that you stop what you're doing and get them the appropriate help. Because if it's mishandled, they may never talk about it again. And then they get to suffer the rest of their life for that. So it's really important that we as nurses stop what we're doing and help them in their place, okay? And it comes out, you know, it comes out in other places. We didn't really talk about that much this morning, but you know, when we think about where we're working and what we're doing, you know, helping people have babies, it comes out. You know, people will have flashbacks to memories and body memories if they were assaulted or if they were abused. These things come out later. So sometimes we don't expect it, but it shows up anyway. So we have to be ready. You know, we have to not forget that this stuff can happen. We already talked about what should happen in the ER. These are important words to use. I do want you to pay attention to that. It's important, we all know it's important what words we use with other people and the damage that words can do, and I'm not like one of them word Nazi police, I'm not. But in this case, it's important, you know, that we use words like reported and not alleged, and declined and not refused. You see what the connotation is by those words? Mm-hmm. Penetration instead of intercourse. Intercourse suggests what? Consent. It's not consensual. Being attacked is not consensual, right? Mm-hmm. And then things like no acute distress. What on earth does that mean? If someone has been attacked, in your book you're going to see rape trauma syndrome. I do want you to read through that so you understand what it looks like right after someone's been assaulted, okay? people might not look like they're in acute distress because they are completely in shock. They have no idea what just happened to them, and they're trying to process, okay? So you don't have to look like you're in distress to be in distress, right? We all know that. So just describe what you see. Use your good describers, okay? Again, documentation, you may be called into a courtroom with this. So you want to make sure that you're saying all the stuff you need to say and being scripted about it, okay? So typical reactions, initially, shock, numbness, and disbelief, okay? And then long term, so once the beginning phase of this happens, people might feel like they're going crazy. And it's important that we tell them that. This is what to expect. Give them everything in writing. We give everything in writing. Why is that?
When they forget, they can go back and read it.
Exactly. They're going to not remember. I mean, seriously, my kid a week ago was in the ER. She cut her hand at work. She did good. She got 7 stitches. I mean, it was a pretty good slice. And here's the thing. She wasn't in any kind of, nothing like this distress at all. She was actually pretty calm for being hurt. And so they stitched it. She went home, did the thing, and she was supposed to take the bandage off a couple days later. Could not remember anything they said to her. She called me up and said, well, I don't know. I'm supposed to wash it, I think. I said, so what are you supposed to wash it with? I don't know. Okay, where's that paper? Where's that paper there? Because seriously, people when they're stressed out do not remember. So it's important that we write it all. And in addition to that, you can say to them, here is my name, you can call back. Call back if you're not sure, right? Talk to me. So we want to tell them what to expect. They're very disorganized when it's the acute phase. Right? The brain is trying to process what just went on. PTSD related to sexual assault means things like flashbacks, re-experiencing trauma just like regular old PTSD. People may withdraw, they may avoid, they're going to avoid wherever they were, the people they were around most likely. They may develop fears and phobias, nightmares, all this kind of stuff. I really thought that it was good that she highlighted the differences in the therapies today, that seeing someone who works specifically with sexual assault victims, super important. So if somebody wants to go get regular old counseling, that's terrific, but they offer something completely different. Okay? They are used to talking to people who've been assaulted, and that's a special thing all by itself. So we want to make sure that people have that type of information, okay? Let's see, we went through all of this. We don't need to talk about empathy and all that. You already got all that down. It's uncommon that somebody might get a benzo to calm down or an SSRI for PTSD. Those would just be just like any other kind. Let's see. I feel like we skipped something. Nope. Okay. There should always be a SART available. This stuff she talked about this morning. So therapy for rapists, there really is none. Because why? Because to change your behavior, you have to actually think there's something wrong with your behavior, and they don't. So there really has not been any positive effects of any types of counseling with rapists. So that's too bad. There really hasn't been anything to be really helpful with that. So that is that. Questions about any of our content? Go ahead.
Okay. So there's like a lot of statistics.
Yeah,
Do you think we're gonna need to know?
you never need to know statistics.
Okay.
No. Those are in there for your own benefit.
Okay.
Other questions? Go ahead.
I know that we went over the questions to ask them, but would we ever directly ask them if they're being abused, or would we, if somebody's suicidal, we would say, are you having suicidal thoughts? We would just be blunt about it. Would we?
Well, I think the reason that we use words like kicking, hitting, punching, hurting is because people can have different ideas about the definition of abuse.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Your idea and mine might be different, or somebody might be used to that kind of treatment and might not really even think of it as abuse.
Okay.
So more specifics you can get, the better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it okay to ask, are you being abused at home? And they say like no, and then you go into more detail.
Well,
like,
that's how
no
come-
hitting.
That's
no.
how come you, no, and you know, that's a very good actual question, because she's talking about, she started to give the negative, I call it the negative laundry list. No hitting, no kicking, no punching, no hurting. So I'm not a gigantical fan of laundry list, unless, okay, you get that person who's gonna tell you about every cat they've ever owned, from Fluffy to Zippy,
Yeah.
and every behavior they've ever had, and you really gotta refocus. Okay, in that case, sometimes you need it, right? You gotta go down each system from top to bottom and just give them, we'll be here all day. But otherwise, what happens when you give laundry lists is that you can actually cut people off of, one, remembering important information, two, saying what they need to say, and including all the details. And I don't like negative lists for the same reason, because you actually prompt me to say no.
Mhm.
And you say, you never had the flu, you never, right? No surgeries, no this, no that. I'm not actually thinking anymore, because I'm watching you go, no, and I go, no. And then you leave and I go, God. Wait, I had this, right? So just, you know, I thought the other thing that was interesting, this morning when you were talking about the person that you had in your walkthrough, I think you said, I don't remember your exact words, but you were talking about her situation and what happened. And you said, and then that happened.
Yeah, I don't want to say it.
I don't blame you for not wanting to say it, but just keep in mind,
I know.
you have to be able to say all the hard words. And you have to be able to, you know, because when you're taking care of patients, if you won't say it, they won't say it,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, really. And we want them to be able to be specific. So I know this was just weird content. This was hard content, right? But I mean, I remember I would have younger girls come into my office and they'd be like, something's wrong with my junk. You know, like, that was one of the times I first of all never heard that term till then. So I was like, explain, okay? But, you know, and my feeling about those sort of things was I was like, if you can't say the word vagina, you shouldn't be using your vagina, okay? Like, let's just be real for a minute here, okay? But really, if you want patients to be specific, and also, you know, sometimes we can then misunderstand what they're talking about too, right? Just what exactly does junk mean? Like, I don't know. Are we talking about your rectum? What are we talking about, right? So we have to like be clear so they can be clear and give us all the information that we need. So just be thinking about, you know, your poker face, you know, and the speaking tone, okay? Especially when it comes to this kind of stuff, because this kind of stuff's hard enough to talk about, right? And if we're embarrassed and we don't want to say it, they may not finish talking about it. So we have to just do the same. Other questions? So much fun. We hate it. Okay. A couple of reminders. Some of you have not signed up for Mrs. Olson's. I sent a little email reminder. Please do that because I have to forward that to her. Don't forget your strengths and weaknesses. If you haven't, a lot of you have sent them already. Make sure you guys send those out. What else?
Did you send yours already?
I don't think I